Hey guys, welcome back to the Savage Omega build series where I cover all 14 weapons to help you safely and efficiently farm Savage Omega, and in each episode I show you how to use the builds, time your punish windows, and execute the hunt cleanly. And today, we're looking at one of the best weapons in the entire game, and honestly, one of the best options for carrying Savage Omega quests right now, and that is the Insurrection Cannon. And even compared to the Rebel Cannon Light Bowgun and the Insurgent's Bow, this Spread Heavy Bowgun completely outclasses them in this matchup, because it not only outdamages both the Rebel Cannon and the Insurgent's Bow, but it also offers way more survivability in the Rebel Cannon, and unlike the bow, it comes with a shield that can block several of Omega's attacks. However, the most important skill in the DPS setup is actually Evade Extender 3, and the skill is basically really incredible because you're not only dodging Omega's attacks and escaping danger, but also you're closing the gap and staying on top of him at all times. And it also allows for basically allows you to safely engage while dishing out about 150 to 250 points of damage per shot, depending on your aim. And on top of the Insurrection Heavy Bowgun, it also comes with slicing ammo, which you can also switch to whenever Omega is out of your range. And the slicing rounds are, along with the other ammo types, have plenty of reach for shooting environmental traps and reacting quickly when Omega moves around them, so you can basically use them in like an adaptive way. And we're also running Quick Sheath 3 for two reasons. The first is that when you sheath your weapon, you can use your Farcaster very fast to escape and retreat just in case you're in a bad situation. And the second is to access your Mandragora mushrooms quickly for healing. Alright, that being said, let's go to a table of contents and break down everything in this video. Alright, so if you're just here for the equipment and decorations, head straight to that timestamp below, but if you actually want to learn how to use this build and squeeze out the maximum DPS possible, then make sure you watch the playstyle section where I break down how to execute the hunt efficiently. And at the end of the video, I'll be showcasing a few community contributions, so stick around if you want to see what other hunters have been coming up with. Alright, so when you start the hunt, make sure you approach Omega and use your palm motif. And after you use your palm motif, make sure your Farcaster is ready as a panic button in case things go south. So just go into your little item bar and equip it. And then for your Mandragora mushrooms, have them set up in the radio menu so you can access them instantly during the fight. And then once you've got that set, draw your heavy bowgun out and get ready to engage with Omega. So during the hunt, focus on Omega's forelegs because that's where you're going to be able to trigger weakness exploit and critical boost for maximum damage. And also staying near Omega's side is also the safest position to be because the hind legs won't really activate weakness exploit, so make sure your shots are letting up on the front version of his forelegs. And you'll often get a long window where you can deal uninterrupted damage, so take advantage of those moments because your sustained DPS can easily make up for any drop of output that your teammates have. So if they're tanking or they're not dealing as much damage, it's fine because you are dealing a lot of damage. Next, let's talk about slicing ammo because it's incredibly useful in certain situations, especially when you're forced to disengage from Omega, like during the flamethrower or other high pressure attacks. So whenever you're far away, switch over to your slicing ammo so you can keep dealing damage while closing the gap. This way, you're staying productive and still contributing DPS as you reposition. And because of its long range reach, slicing ammo is also perfect for popping environmental traps on Omega from a safe distance. And next, one of your most important jobs as a heavy bowgun user is to use your focus strike to pop wounds on Omega. So whenever Omega uses atomic rays or laser beams, there's a chance that a temporary weak spot will appear. And during those moments, time your focus strike carefully because if you land at the right time, you can trigger the wound for a huge team advantage, and you can also interrupt Omega's attacks. And outside of that, always keep an eye out for wounds on other parts of Omega's body, especially those where your melee teammates can't easily reach, like on top of his body or whatever. And that's where you can step in and make a difference by being able to pop those wounds from a distance. So whenever Omega uses his flamethrower, you want to roll towards the area without the red glow and then roll back into the previous zone once the flame passes to stay safe. And for punish windows, when you dodge into the first safe area, you can usually get one clean shot in before you need to roll again to avoid the next sweep. And another option to guard the attack is basically to use the manual guard, but keep in mind you cannot use auto guard, so this means like you need to actually time the block. So if you miss a timing, you'll be knocked down and you'll take heavy damage. And there's also a ranged punish window here, where since you often have to like move away from the flamethrower area anyway, you can switch to your slicing ammo and keep dealing damage while Omega is locked into this animation. And this is especially effective after the area 3 DPS check because Omega from that point forward will launch 3 flamethrower attacks in a row. Next, another important component is the micro Omegas. So whenever Savage Omega launches micro Omegas, you're going to handle this very differently than other builds. So this time you want to prioritize the blue micro Omegas because when destroyed, it spawns a shield to let you deal uncontested damage and protects you from incoming projectiles. And in other words, it's both a defensive and DPS boost option, and it only takes about 1 to 2 shots to destroy them, so it's definitely worth the effort. And as for the other micro Omegas, just be extremely careful because if they target you, they'll self-destruct and keep you in hit stun, which can leave you wide open for Omega's follow-up attacks. And I wouldn't really waste my time shooting them down either, because that just takes away from your DPS. Either dodge at the last moment or tank the hits if you can afford them, then get right back into position to keep dealing DPS. Next, when entering into area 2, avoid being the first one to step inside because Omega always targets the first hunter who enters into the arena. Let one of your teammates trigger him instead, and then once you're in, activate the second motif, the wing motif, to deal some quick damage to him. Something else to talk about is that Omega has a very specific attack pattern in this phase where he usually starts by launching mortar fire into the area, then create distance to prepare for his laser beam. So you need to make sure you dodge the mortar shots first, then either block the laser beam with your shield or use your Farcaster to escape if you're caught out of position. This pattern is easy to recognize once you've seen it a few times. And as for your punish windows, so during the sequence, you basically want to move to Omega's side and attack his front legs. And sometimes a wound will appear during the attack, giving you a chance to pop it with your focus strike for extra damage. However, keep in mind that Omega doesn't always follow up to mortar fire with laser beam. In the clip below, you can see him go from mortar fire straight into atomic rays instead. So the mortar phase can lead into multiple follow-ups and you'll need to stay alert. But another variation is when Omega does his charge attack first, then immediately follows up with a laser beam. This combo is particularly dangerous because if the charge knocks someone down, they'll basically wake up into the beam for a near guaranteed knockout. So even if no one gets hit though, the extra distance Omega creates makes it harder to circle behind him, which is normally a safe tactic. So he loves using these mix-ups because it limits your movement options and keeps you guessing. Next, whenever you're the target of Omega's mustard bomb attack, you can actually have a brief punish window, but it's risky if you don't execute it perfectly. So whenever Omega marks you for an attack, there's a 5-second gap between the moment he locks onto you and when the bomb actually launches. And during those 5 seconds, Omega is completely vulnerable, which means everyone, including you, can safely unload damage on him. And there's also a distinct animation right before he fires, which lets you time your last 2 seconds before you roll away and dodge the incoming blast. And also keep in mind that the attack leaves behind a lingering fire hazard. And if Omega continues to fight in that area, it can make it harder to land clean shots on him. So besides squeezing in some DPS, you can also lure Omega's mortar fire away from the main battle zone to keep the keep the arena safer for the rest of the fight. Alright, so regarding atomic rays, there isn't really much of a punish window if you're directly behind him. In that position, your best move is to avoid getting hit by standing between the gaps of the rays or performing a manual guard to block his attack. But be careful though, because Omega sometimes fires the atomic rays twice in a row, so don't drop your guard too early. However, there is a great punish opportunity if you basically position yourself at an angle. So the rays fire at a 90-degree interval, which means there's a dead zone at about a 45-degree angle relative to Omega. So if you stand there, you'll avoid the beams entirely and have a clear opening to basically deal damage safely. And as you can see in the clip below, the angled positioning lets you stay aggressive while completely avoiding the atomic rays. Next is his freeze bomb attack. So, when it comes to Omega's freeze bomb attack, this move actually becomes a free DPS opportunity for a range user like us, because all you need to do is basically position yourself just outside the blast radius, which is just far enough to avoid the frost effect but also close enough to keep hitting his vulnerable spots and being at critical distance. So as long as you're in that spacing, you're essentially safe and you have a consistent opening to deal damage. And this attack is exclusive to the Savage Omega version, which he gained after scanning Jin Dahad during the early cutscene, making it one of the most, one of the more unique mechanics in this fight. Next is a starboard laser attack. So whenever Omega uses starboard laser, you basically got 2 solid options. You can either roll away and switch to slicing ammo to keep dealing damage from a distance, or if you don't want to lose your ground, you can block the attack. But this comes entirely down to timing. So after Omega launches the beam, there's a slight delay, about half a second, before the explosion hits. That's your cue. You want to block just after the beam passes over the ground, right before the explosion goes off. So in the slow clip below, you'll see the timing clearly. The laser fires and there's about a half a second pause, and I block roughly a quarter second after the beam. That slight delay is what saves you, so don't block immediately when the laser appears. Wait just a beat, then block. Next, in area 3, when you reach the DPS check, here's what you want to do. You want to switch over to the Cuckoo Light Bowgun and equip the Rocksteady Mantle, and then immediately paralyze Nursilla. And then once she's locked down, you want to fire your adhesive ammo and then finish her off with flaming ammo to clear the phase quickly. And just be careful not to accidentally hit the endemic life in the area. Just let them come to you instead, and you can easily track their movements on the minimap as well to stay aware of your surroundings, just to make sure the DPS check goes smoothly. So yeah, definitely look at the minimap as well, because it can help you see where the endemic life is. So for area 4, it's pretty much the same routine as before. Just stay focused and keep executing. And one thing that's worth highlighting is that the shield generators are really important, the ones that Omega drops. So these are extremely useful to heavy bowgun users. And as you'll see in the clip below, I was able to collect multiple shield generators and use them to block several of Omega's strongest attacks, most notably the MRV missile strike. And in one instance, the attack was targeted directly at me, but thanks to the shield generator, I was able to deploy it, block the hit, and continue dealing damage without missing a beat. So yeah, they're really, really good. And other than that, this phase is really just execution. You already have all the tools you need, and honestly, this is probably the easiest weapon to use for farming Salvage Omega. And even if your teammates aren't doing as much damage, as long as there's a tank soaking up hits, you can carry the entire hunt with this setup. Alright, let's move on to the equipment deck and decorations so you can copy this build, master this playstyle, and start farming Salvage Omega with ease. Alright guys, so here's all the equipment, decorations, talisman, and basically everything you need to do to copy this build. So yeah, take a screenshot, pause the video if you need to, whatever you need to basically get the build. And if you have any questions or concerns, just put them in the comments and I'll help you out. If you don't have this talisman, you know, we can talk about like what some substitutes can be in the comments. Just leave a comment and I'll help you out. So for the community updates, I want to highlight a few things before we wrap up. So first, we've got a heavy bowgun build shared by one of the players in the community, and I'll put their setup on the screen so you can check it out if you'd like to give it a try. Second, a big shout out to Bajan Cheese 90 for suggesting that I put a bigger emphasis on punish windows, focusing more on what you can do to deal damage during specific openings. That was a fantastic idea, and I started implementing it more in the newer videos. And finally, another great contribution comes from Prince Artemis, who shared a really helpful tip on the Lance video. They pointed out that you should always leap backwards since it covers the most distance compared to other leap directions. Super practical advice for surviving those tight moments. So yeah, shout out to everyone contributing and helping the community grow. If you have any optimizations, tips, or build ideas, drop them in the comments, and I'll make sure to shout you out or your channel or whatever you need. Alright guys, that's it for this one. Take care, and good luck with your hunts, and I'll see you in the next video.